Do you want to start us or do you want me to today?
You go ahead.
All right. Hey guys, welcome back to the Wholehearted Podcast here. We are out here on a beautiful morning, Friday morning in Logan, Utah, up in the foothills above my house again. We've got a little bit of rain coming down, but the air is fresh. It feels almost like being in Hawaii with the humidity, and as you guys can see, there's no better place to come go to work than right here, right?
Yeah.
So,
even on a wet, rainy day.
Yeah, but even the rain's a little refreshing. I'm sure it's probably got my hair laying totally flat right now, but that's all right.
It's a good thing that's not important.
Yeah.
One of the beautiful things that you can kind of see around us, if you're watching the video at least, is there are clouds that we are on level with and above in certain parts. And it actually, you were saying Hawaii, but it kind of reminds me of being out in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, where Papa lived. So that's a little bit endearing for me.
Bring back some memories.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, I wish we could just stay out here all day.
Yeah. I know at least one or two people that would shoot us for that.
Yeah, no kidding. I've got a wife at home right now that would be like, "You call that work?" Right?
No, we're working.
Really, we are working. I swear it. I told her today. I told her about our outdoor office, project, and she's like, "Oh, that you guys are so full of crap." She's like, "Now you're gonna be going to work every day, and all you're gonna do is sit on the top of a mountain and like do nothing." And so.
I mean, that's part of the reason it's almost good to have somebody who's saying that's not a thing, for you to have a good rebuttal.
Yeah.
And your rebuttal is that you actually do the thing and it is work.
I've been thinking about all of the rebuttals because I know where I want to take this project,
Right.
which means pretty much always being outside. So I'm always coming up with really good ideas. In fact, that's goes along with the book that you and I guess it's a documentary we listened to this week on the power of being out in nature. And
Right.
And so I told her about it yesterday. I said, "You got to listen to this documentary about the 3-day effect of being out in nature." And she's like, "Oh, so what, you and Chase are going camping this weekend too?" And I said, "No,
That
but
was the
can
soft
we?"
pitch. Yeah. She thought you were prefacing. I mean, it is Memorial Day weekend, so.
Yeah. So, but today, Chase, I wanted to start off with just kind of a question for you to think about and maybe come up with any ideas. I ran into something today with my work at UPS that made me think about this as I was working. So for everyone who doesn't know us very well yet, I work in the morning times at UPS, helping to get the big semi trucks unloaded and then the packages loaded into the trucks that deliver to you guys' houses. And I was asked today to go into a different spot than I normally work. And so I typically like load a couple trucks for a couple of drivers and then go home. But today they asked me to move into the semi trailer and help unload the trailers.
Okay.
And the reason they asked me to do that is because they have an employee there that hasn't been pulling his weight, and they know that I'm not afraid to speak up. And so the supervisor basically wanted me to do his dirty work, and he asked me to go in there and kind of like motivate this guy. And the guy saw me coming up to help him unload today, and he got offended because he's like, "Oh, I know why they're sending Tyler up to unload. Like, everyone thinks that I'm out of shape and fat and that I'm no good." And basically that's kind of like what I was sort of thinking. This was like, I was going
if
up
you're
there,
being completely honest.
Yeah, I was going up there with this idea of like, okay, I'm going to line him out. I'm going to tell him, I'm going to tell him exactly what he needs to do, and then if not, I'm going to get him to quit today. That was because it'll be better for him. It'll be better for the whole sort. Like, he'll be able to move into a place where he'll fit better. And so I went up there with that attitude. And my question to you is this: have you ever had a moment where you're so sure that you're doing something right, only to have it just like thrown in your face 2 instants later and see something be done in a totally different way that was more effective than the way you were going to do it?
If you give me a minute, I bet I can think of something from maybe today. if not, it'll for sure be from this week.
Okay. Yeah. So that happened for me today.
Yeah.
And if you have any thoughts or ideas on this, we got started and I was outside of the trailer, and this kid I could tell was already had a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah.
And boxes started flying out, like not like on the conveyor belt like you see on the commercials. They were flying out. A box actually hit me in the face, and I told him, I said, "Hey, dude, what's your problem?" And they kept coming out. I'm like now getting angry, and I pick up a box and I throw it back at him. And we're basically getting to like this box fight with you guys' packages, by the way. Sorry about that. If there's a size 10.5, it's mine. So I'm starting to get amped up, and I'm starting to, okay, I'm going to teach him a lesson, and I'm going to show him how you're supposed to work, and this and that and the other.
By the way, this is the Wholehearted podcast. We just want to make sure you know that you're tuned in the right thing.
Yeah, you're right. Like we're not trying to hide anything here, and you guys see life on our terms and the way that we're living. And
it's reality.
So this started to happen. So I pulled myself out of the trailer, and I came out and I said, okay, I got to catch my wits about me. And so I took a little bit of a break, and the other two guys that are in the unload with me are unloading, and then all of a sudden the other guy comes out that's not a problem, and he stands outside and he doesn't say anything. And we're like, hey, get back in there and go to work. He's like, I'm afraid I can't. Like, I'm afraid I'm going to get hit or like something thrown at me. And so then I was like, all right, I know what to do now. Because I'm a therapist, I can go in and lay down a hard boundary, and I can tell him, all this stuff. But I was going to do it in a very like forceful, sort of coercive, like guilt trip type of a way.
Yeah.
And just at that moment, my supervisor comes walking up. He's like, hey, fellas, like, how come we're all outside of the trailer right now? Aren't we supposed to be unloading? And we said, hey, you need to get up in there and talk to the guy. My supervisor, to his credit, I mean, he taught me a lesson today. He walked up in that trailer with this furious employee who's he's feeling judged, and he's feeling like people are trying to force him out, which we kind of were.
Right.
And my supervisor just talked him down for a couple of minutes and then had him leave and go sit down in the office. And then he went down into the office and continued to have a conversation with him in a very gentle but honest way. And just said, hey, look, I can see something's going on for you. Tell me what's happening. And this hardened kid, he opens up and says, I actually feel just really insecure because I feel like I'm not pulling my own weight. And I don't have the energy yet because this is a new job for me, and I don't have the stamina that everybody else has.
Doing it for a long time.
And then I hear people making comments about how late we're getting out every morning because I'm so slow. And he said, I just can't take it anymore. And my supervisor then built a game plan with him on how to just go and give a best effort and some different measuring sticks for how he could progress. And he came back up 20 minutes later, totally different person.
Wow.
He was soft. He was willing to go to work. He actually carried a conversation with me in a like getting to know you sense of, hey, what do you do for a living? What do you do for a living? Oh, and by the time we were done unloading, he was telling me all about his family's problems, and I was doing therapy in the trailer with him, like in the right way that I do therapy, and I just thought, my supervisor, he taught me a real lesson about the difference between coercion and power and influence. Wow. And just that idea of taking the time to actually be curious and get to know somebody instead of just feeling like you got to correct them instantly.
Oh man, that's an incredible story.
Yeah.
I actually did think of one, and this is from a week and a half ago. My leader at church, who I work with frequently, his name is Peter Hannon, and he's a great mentor for me, somebody I respect and admire. He reached out to me a couple weeks ago and said, hey, there was somebody that passed away in our congregation. I will be performing the service. If you would like to kind of see how it's done, let me show you the ropes a little bit, because I'm totally a noob and I got a lot to learn. So to have that opportunity is really good for me.
Yeah.
I didn't know the person who had passed away. I hadn't even heard her name previously. The things that I did know is that she was a biker, that she wasn't very actively a part of our congregation, and she passed away while she was motorcycling.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And so she got in a wreck, and I don't know the details of that, and it doesn't really matter. But while I was at the funeral, she was a member of a group called the Litas, and it's girls, all female group that they wear purple bandanas and black shirts and jeans and boots, and all of them showed up.
Oh, wow.
And this is at a funeral home that's kind of your typical American furnished style, like dark oak everything, really dim lit, chapel style setting. When I walked in and saw the group, my judgments, my natural biases were firing off left and right, and man, I got rebuked hard by God, because there was one moment in particular that I'll share, and this is a part of a chain of a few that happened, but the one that I think stands out the most is, and I might get a little emotional at this.
Yeah.
There was a man that it was his sister who had passed away. So the brother of this lady, he was asked to say the family prayer before they go into the actual service. And the casket's open, everyone's standing around, and I didn't know who was going to be coming up, but this man steps up, and he's wearing a big baggy black trench coat. He's got a big fuzzy beard, a ponytail tightly bound, just real oil slicked, and he just looked like a rough individual in this instant of judgment. And my first thought was, this guy's gonna say the prayer? Does he know how to pray to God?
Know how?
Yeah. And again, this is probably more than I would normally share, but it was so amazing when he started to speak. It was with such perfect mildness and gentleness. There was love in his voice.
Yeah.
There was a pain that he was feeling, and this pure communion that was taking place between him and God, that was one of the most eloquent and magnificent prayers I've ever heard in my life.
That's awesome.
And it was just a moment of pure glory and what prayers are meant to be.
Yeah.
And man, I had so much judgment, thinking, this guy, he can't possibly know God like I know God.
Right.
And what a fool I am.
Stuck in self-righteousness, and what a gift of an experience, but then what a gift of a reminder of those the ways that we get in our own way.
Yeah.
And that judgment that comes out even when we're doing our best not to. And yeah, what an awesome experience, Chase. I was thinking about this in my therapy a little bit too, and maybe you could speak to this a little bit, but how do you tune yourself up and get yourself out of those places of judgment when you realize that something has to be done, or something needs to be addressed with, say, a relationship, and you want to value the relationship and you think you've got it right? How do you get yourself checked with that judgment and get it right sometimes?
I'm not perfect at this, but I'm actually thinking of a few instances that are they're unresolved right now. That there's a couple of people that I work with where there's a certain type of friction between the two of us that I haven't addressed, because I'm fearful that when I do address it, it's going to be like a bomb going off, instead of, hey, this is where I'm coming from, and I have kind of a problem from my perspective, and I just want to let you know that I'm working on it on my end, and some kind of good open communication. Most of my experiences growing up and some of the examples that I had in my life, it was bottle it up until the pressure just maxes out and then blow up.
And then it's ugly.
Then it
never goes well.
Yeah, it never goes well. Her feelings are going to be hurt. You're going to say things you don't want to. And
looks like UPS this morning.
Yeah, maybe like UPS this morning. But I think there are a lot of times. Chelsea is actually really good at this with me. she's a better example than I am in this kind of scenario, where if she has a problem, a lot of the time she will share it with me at the right time. And I know this is something that you've talked about quite a bit in the past, is being in drama, and that the drama triangle. So if you're in drama, maybe you could explain that afterwards, but that's not the best time to bring something up. And so what is the drama triangle?
Well, yeah, I mean,
like
we could spend probably a few different episodes on this. I'm sure it'll cycle through, but basically the drama triangle says is that when we don't have our needs being met the way that we think they should be met, we end up kind of dipping back into being like a 3 or 4-year-old child in an adult body, and we take on different roles to try to manipulate our way into getting our needs met. And the 3 roles are, the first one is the victim, and the victim is, we take something personal, and then we feel like we're not capable, and we feel like we're getting picked on, and the world's not fair, and then we become helpless. And then we try to solicit from other people sympathy to tell us how unfair the world is to keep us stuck, instead of actually get us out of the hole we're in. And so that's the victim. The second role that we drop into is something called the persecutor. A victim needs a good persecutor, right? And the persecutor is the role where it's more of the blaming role. It's everybody else's fault. I can never take accountability, and then I attack people. It's the attacking version of drama. It's a way to try to maintain control, and it turns relationships into a power-driven relationship with a one-up, one-down kind of relationship instead of a connected relationship. And then the third role that we cycle through sometimes is something called the rescuer. And the rescuer tries to find their self-worth and their value by making sure all of the victims in the world are taken care of, and that I'm the solution, not helping the person who's the victim get out of their role. And then what happens in rescuer mode is we see other people as less than us, even though we won't admit that. And then we're always there to rescue, but then we get frustrated when people don't value us, and then we drop over into victim, and then we cycle through, you know. And it's just like this dance that we get into with other people, trying to get our needs met, but never allowing vulnerability to let connection happen.
So at any point you could be in one of those. If you're
in moments, I can be in victim in my own mind while I'm being the persecutor to my wife. Does that make sense?
Oh, man.
There's a reason why I'm persecuting her, because I have to have a good reason for it. So it's something she did that was unfair to me. So I'm a victim on the inside, but now I'm coming at her in a very angry, harsh tone.
Yeah.
And what drama does is it tries to help us express in some way whatever it is we're feeling or that we're not getting, but we never actually get to say it or ask for it. So
what's, I guess, in your experiences, what have been some of the solutions? Like because you can respond in a good way and not be in that triangle, but
I think for me, a couple of things that have been really helpful just in my own life, in my own practice, when I'm actually getting it right, like I didn't this morning, is the first thing that if we could all just adopt this as a way of life, I think it would really help our world. But everybody is doing the best they can. So if I'm looking at this, for example, this kid throwing boxes out of the trailer, this was his current best response in the situation he was in to try to express himself. And if I can pause and go, how could this possibly be his best response? I might be able to see that underneath that box flying at my head, there's something pushing that other than the anger. And I could have stepped into that a little bit differently. Another thing that I really focus on in my work as a therapist is, and I told you this on the way up, but I had another therapist give me a compliment a couple of weeks ago when he was leaving to go take another job in Louisiana, and he said, "Tyler, you're one of the few people that knows how to smack somebody in the face emotionally and have them thank you for it afterwards." And I said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And he said, "I don't know what you do, but you can hit somebody, like tell them, hey, look, you can't get out of your own way, and you are totally ruining your life." And they go, "Yeah, like that's something to think about. Thanks a lot, you know." And I was thinking, how does that work when it works? And one of the things that I think I try to do is I try to see how what the person is doing is not effective for their goals. So if I can pause and say, well, the reason your wife is not wanting to connect with you is partially because you either get very defensive all the time or you shrink away and act like a victim all the time, I could say that and be like, hey, stop being a pansy. Or, dude, like you are being so immature right now.
Yeah.
But if I'm thinking, what is he really trying to get to? Well, he's trying to find connection too. And if I approach it from the goal that he has, which is to be connected, now I can say, man, I imagine it's really frustrating to not be able to connect with your wife the way you want to, right? He's like, yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you get me. I'm like, yeah, I wonder if your approach is actually preventing you from getting more of what you really want.
Yeah.
And when you do this and this and this, when you attack her, when you shrink away, or when you roll over to the other side of the bed after you pursue her for sex and she doesn't want to, like, is that actually helping you get what you want? And I imagine that's got to be really frustrating to be doing things that are continuing to hurt yourself. It's kind of like putting your fingers in the door jamb and just like slamming it shut, you know? Like, that's so frustrating. And people respond to that for some reason. I don't know why, but you know, a lot of times they'll look at me and go, yeah, I do. I'm like, sweet, what are we going to do differently now? You know? So I don't know. I don't know if that is a tool or not, but that's something I try to do in my own mind when I'm looking at trying to approach it when I'm not in drama myself.
Something you said reminded me of a little way of living is trust that everybody is doing their best. So it's exactly what you were saying. I keep thinking of this principle also that ties to the book that you shared, the 4 agreements. So don't take anything personally and don't make assumptions. Those are two of the agreements. But why? Why is that something that matters, and how does that actually help aid in the process of communication?
Oh, that's a whole nother set of podcasts we can run. But yeah, I think the word that came to mind as you were talking was not taking something personally allows us to then see the person that we're interacting with as a person instead of being worried about ourselves and becoming self-centered. And then not making assumptions allows us to approach the relationship or the situation with, the word that came to mind was curious. It allows us to be curious and to seek understanding with somebody rather than need to be right. I think needing to be right just gets in the way a lot, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what was happening this morning for me, is I needed to be right until I had somebody very gently from a peripheral way just reinforce that lesson that we're focused on effectiveness. And the effective way to approach that situation would have been through curiosity.
Yeah.
So
actually last night, Chelsea and I were doing dishes. We're at the kitchen sink. It's a tiny little space, and what we'll typically do is I'll wash the dishes, and once they're ready to be rinsed, I'll yell out, "Rinse-a-roo!" And then she'll come on over and give them a rinse, put them in our dishwasher rack. And when I say dishwasher rack, I mean there's no dishwasher. It is literally the rack out of a dishwasher that we have set by our kitchen, and it works flawlessly. It was a genius buy on her part over at a thrift store. But I was noticing there's differences in how she does things versus how I do things. And one of the little ones was that, and totally maybe unintentional, subconsciously, maybe she did it intentionally, doesn't matter, she'll occasionally stack something in a way that I wouldn't stack things. And I saw it and I thought in my head, like, oh, but if you do it different, this, just start all these things firing off of how to do it better, because I'm right.
She needs to do it your way.
She needs to do it my way, and I can give her an education right here and right now
Yeah.
about how to stack dishes. Does that matter? No, not really. Not at all. What I was missing, though, is that she was trying to connect with me in little ways by making silly jokes or doing little dance moves or have an impression that she does of whoever. It's so funny how I can be on this single track of of I need to be right about something petty and completely miss this awesome opportunity for connection with her, that she's throwing me a line. All I got to do is take the bait and boom, we're there. But it happens so frequently that pride just comes out, and that's a monster for me, is I've got to be right about this thing. And whenever I recognize that, hey, actually this thing is stupid, let go of it, let this one slide, and maybe one day she'll ask, you know, or maybe one day, or maybe not, and then what, you know?
And it really doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, not even an ounce.
No.
So
yeah, that's a really good simple story, you know. So I think, as I'm just sitting here talking to you today, I think maybe one of the takeaways today is that idea of, and maybe for everyone who's listening to this, in what ways have you guys had that kind of awareness come to your mind of needing to not be right, but to be curious instead, or to have some lesson taught to you right when you're sure that you're right and you're doing it the right way? We'd love to hear some of the instances that you guys are running into as well, but it's kind of a good reminder, I think, for all of us today. And can we be curious? Can we be a little bit more gentle in the way that we approach people when we're sure that we're right? And can we seek understanding? And I think those tools are things that we just forget. They're so simple, but I think that's they're vital to having connection in our lives. So, got anything else today?
No, that's it.
All right, thanks,
Enjoy your
guys.
Friday.
Yeah, you too, man.